Hi, 1997 was probably the last good year for DOS, but it doesn't mean that it lacked quality games. I mean, just check them out. All is fair in love and war, and Constructor is all about war. And construction too. It's the prevalent theme in the game. In essence, it's a fun tongue-in-cheek business simulation where you're the state developer competing against other companies in the same line of work. The game is played in an isometric perspective and allows for construction of 40 entirely different structures. So, you'll be raising housing estates for all classes of the citizens, workplaces, services and amenities that would keep them happy, employed and in line. But what you'll also be doing is fighting off the competition, and you really don't have to play fair. In fact, it's probably best if you don't. You can set fires to opponents' buildings, capture said buildings, send hippies, ghosts, yes, ghosts, or tax to opponents' properties, so that they would go there and explain by means of baseball bats why they should not compete with you in your city. And you can even employ thieves to steal from them. In the same time, you have to prevent opponents from doing the same to you by assigning police patrols to key areas to secure your properties. Most of all, however, you need to keep your tenants happy and comply with their requests as best as you can. Constructor is a balancing act of growth, prosperity and a little sabotage for good measure. All in a very fun, similar to Theme Park in the way the people behave and act environment, full of funny situations and quirky personalities. But don't let the laughs fool you, Constructor is anything but shallow, and the underlying economics model that's humorously approached is actually pretty sound and solid. Carmageddon is what Armageddon with Bruce Willis is based on. Cars being shot into space, with kamikaze drivers aiming themselves into a comet in an act of desperation to save humanity at the cost of their own lives. Or was it Fast and Furious? It's equally as plausible and both are hilarious. Only not really, and not at all. Carmageddon, same as its successor that released a year later, is one of the best arcade over-the-top racers ever made. It's a natural evolution of races like Supercars, Death Rally or Destruction Derby, but using more advanced 3D engine with even more brutality all throughout than ever before. In essence, the races are theoretically identical to those in any other game in the genre, meaning you can win them by just completing a certain number of laps and coming up first, before any of your opponents does. But that is not what this game is all about. And there are two other winning conditions, both more fun and more likely what you'll be aiming to achieve on each track. So you can also win by incapacitating all pedestrians, which is easier said than done, as there can be upwards of 500 of these per track. Or, and that's the goal most aim for, you can destroy all other cars. Each race has a certain time to complete either of the goals, but you can extend it by running over the pedestrians or damaging your opponent's cars. It's a simple yet enjoyable formula that hardly ever gets old, and the game feels nigh infinitely replayable. Especially that all 36 tracks included are really well designed too, often open form and full of secret passages, jumps and hills, so that even if racing only, you'll inevitably end up performing tricks whether you aimed to or not, and land on other cars, ramming into them at high speed or splashing a passerby here and there, preferably all the time and everywhere. But wait, that's not all. There are also numerous active and passive power-ups that can affect your car, your opponents or even pedestrians, and all come with their own sets of bonuses if used correctly. If you like Destruction Derby, Carmageddon with its dynamic damage system and addictive gameplay will be a dream come true for you. As the title suggests, blood is full of it. Blood, that is. It's a first-person perspective horror and macabre-themed shooter made in Duke Nukem's 3D build engine. It's also one of the best 2.5D shooters of its time. It's excellent. It oozes grim and gloomy atmosphere, it has a very dark sense of humor, memorable enemies like zombies and cultists, and a lot of very imaginative weapons to choose from. I mean, pitchforks, spray cans and voodoo dolls are not the weirdest of what it has to offer. Blood is definitely not for kids, as guts and gore are galore here, and it's not unusual to find bodies in various states of decomposition and fountains of blood after each enemy death. It's not a cheap gimmick though, and the game has pretty interesting, even if a bit simple and shallow story to follow. You play as Caleb, a very skilled and deadly gunslinger, perhaps the best that there ever was. Fitting, as you two are very skilled at basically anything and would be a great gunslinger too, if you had guns and would dabble in slinging. And Caleb would have been one for years to come if he wouldn't have met a woman that he fell for. She got him involved in a mysterious and dark cult known as Cabal. Yes, like that Commodore 64 game, Cabal. As he learns more and more about it, he fell for their preachings, promises and hopes and quickly rose through the ranks, eventually becoming one of the 4 chosen, the favorite worshippers of the evil god Chernobog. As most gods, however, this one too is rather selfish. So, one of those days when he's particularly bored, he decides to end his Forchosen, and so he does. Years later, resurrected under mysterious circumstances and filled with anger, hate and lust for revenge, Caleb sets off to learn why his god betrayed him and to make him pay for it. Most levels are located in and around realistically looking structures, and locations feature interactive objects and even destructible environments, though these last only in specific and scripted locations. Levels are designed in a very clever and memorable way, often having numerous hidden areas behind destructible walls or moving floors. Blood is definitely not for the faint-hearted, as it's one of the most gruesome and violent FPSs of the 1990s. So, if you have a high tolerance for severed limbs, heads on spikes and bodies impaled to walls, there's a lot to love here and have fun with. Mortal Kombat Trilogy is my third most favorite 2D Mortal Kombat, after first and second respectively, and the only one other than the first that I really enjoyed completing. I hated single player in second because the computer cheated. Anyway, since we're on the subject of the trilogy and not any other, it's obviously a 2D versus fighting game combining characters from the first 3 titles for an Ultimate Fighter matchup of the 90s. And you can play as literally any of the characters that we saw in previous games. So Kano, Sub-Zero, Scorpion, Liu Kang, Johnny Cage, Raiden, Sonya, Reptile, Baraka, Jax, Kitana, Mylina, Kang Lao, Shang Tsung, Sindel, Sector, Striker, Nightwolf, Shiva, Smoke, Rain, Jade, Ermac, second Liu Kang, because why the hell not, one's not enough, Noob Saibot, second, this time unmasked and less lore-friendly Sub-Zero, Cyrax, second Smoke in Cyber Ninja form, whatever that may mean, Cabal, Goro, Kintaro, Motaro, Boloyang and Shao Kahn. And only one of these last 4 former bosses is not in the game. Can you guess which one? He may have been a unit in his own right, but definitely not present in the series in any shape or form. Each of the included over 30 characters have their moves, fatalities and looks sourced from their own games, and they play as well as they did originally. Backgrounds are also a combination of old and new and are as fantastic as the cast of fighters is. Objectively speaking, the trilogy is the very best 2D iteration in a way too long by now running series. Personally, I love the first game the most, but I'm biased towards it, and this bias is fueled with gallons of nostalgia and familiarity, and nothing else. If I was to metaphorically stand aside and compare them all, Trilogy was easily the best, at least when it comes to variety, features and responsiveness of controls. One thing that it fails at least in my opinion, and sadly that's also a very important thing to me personally, is the atmosphere. I just feel nothing when playing Trilogy. As compared to the first 2 titles that not only gave me shivers with their very climatic musical tunes and their respective title screens, but also set the mood with their intros. In first, with the story and genesis of the tournament described on a Goro-themed background, and then short clips of all fighters playing out their moments of glory. And in second, much simpler, with the starry sky and slowly starting storm cutting through it with a lightning and leaving Roman numeral 2 in it in dark blood red coloring. They were both short and not sophisticated in any meaning of the word, but epic feeling inducing nonetheless, if that makes any sense. If I was to go off my memory only, I could not tell you anything about Trilogy's startup splash title screen or the accompanying tune. I have literally no idea how it starts or sounds. All that aside, personal feelings especially, Mortal Kombat Trilogy is a really competent, fun and bucketfuls of blood spilling fighter that will no doubt keep you and your friends entertained and competing for weeks on end. Or will end one of those friendships over a disagreement who'll get to play as Sub-Zero or Scorpion first. Both options are equally as feasible. While I may have not played Screamer Rally as much as I did the earlier 2, it doesn't reflect negatively on the quality of this game. It features 4 cars, 2 with front drive and 2 with 4x4, with each having their own statistics of acceleration, braking and weight, and each feeling entirely different while racing, even more so than ever before, as handling, tire type and pressure, both suspensions and brakes can be customized in the garage, to best suit the challenge ahead and your driving style alike. Screamer Rally drops entirely arcade racing for a more rally-like approach, similar to that of Sega Rally, but dare I say it, considerably more enjoyable. Screamer Rally offers few game modes to choose from. Arcade mode, where you race for fun against 5 opponents, time attack mode, with checkpoints against the ghost of the previous best run, and championship/league, where you compete in 4 consecutive leagues, fighting for spots and get to unlock new tracks. You start with 3 of these and end up with 7. I have very fond memories of Screamer 2, and that's why it will always be my favorite in the series, but if I was to be objective about it, I'd have to risk saying that this third game is arguably the best arcade racer out of all 3, and one of the best on DOS overall. War never changes. and the great nuclear war that wiped most of life off the face of the Earth was no different. Brutal, devastating, but also a short one. It took but a day to lay devastation to our world, and what emerged after was a hot and empty wasteland, with only small, remote communities spread over large distances split with patches of radioactive wastes full of dangers, raiders and mutants of various kinds. You're an inhabitant of one of the vault's large pre-war bunkers that were supposedly built to hold large chunks of population safe after nuclear holocaust. Yours, Vault 13, however, had its water chip broken, a purification controller chip without which the vault has no access to clean water. So, you're sent into the wastes to find the replacement, and you only have 150 days to do so. Initially, as if you play your cards right, you can double it during one of the quest lines. Fallout is a post-apocalyptic RPG set in a wasteland of what was once US West Coast. The game world is entirely free to explore from the get-go, and you can go anywhere you'd like. It doesn't mean that you're equipped to deal with what you find there, but you can go wherever you feel like. The main quest is interesting and will take you through a series of hoops to complete, but it's not overly long. Fallout's depth and length comes from hundreds of side quests, big and small, that are scattered throughout the whole game world and enhance the gameplay experience, making it feel more immersive and characters you meet more real. Fallout features very fun and well-designed turn-based combat system and uses action points as a basis for all the movement and attacks during encounters. You can attack aiming your shots or swings depending on the weapon at various body parts of all enemies, and the choice can result in increased accuracy or critical chances. After all, head is a much more fragile appendix than the arm, at least to blunt force or high-speed bullets. But since we're on the combat, the game is built in a way that allows completing it without ever actually fighting, by either avoiding or running from encounters and solving conflicts by conversations, provided your skills would allow for that. Fallout is the first title in my beloved series of role-playing games and in my personal opinion, the best game of the entire 1997. Ecstatica 2 starts directly after the first one, and it's a still survival adventure horror with action-based combat. This time, however, the game world is much bigger and features some free roaming areas. You can use various weapons and in time spells too, either by found magic scrolls or an equipped magic staff. It's a bigger, better and more impressive version of the first game and should be an easy pick for fans of survival horrors, especially Alone in the Dark. Ecstatica 2 is still using the rather odd-looking but interestingly designed sphere-based engine, which builds all of its objects and characters out of spheres. It gives the game unique look and feel, not found in any other title on the platform. After saving Ecstatica in the first game, her and our protagonist learn about evil Archmage, summoning demons to our hero's homeland, slaughtering or transforming people living there into brutal killing machines. To defeat the evil Archmage, the hero has to find all pieces of the Elder Sign scattered around the land and use it to banish the demon forces. All of them, but the last, are protected by dark sorcerers. Last is kept along with kidnapped Ecstatica by the Archmage himself. Arguably, I should have spent much more time playing Ecstatica 2, as it's a rather ingenious little title and sadly, I've never finished it, but back then I kept swapping games one after another and only RPGs and strategies were good enough to hold my interest longer. As in most cases of prolonged peace, something had to happen to end it. This time it was the aliens, because of course that it's them again. They've set up their operations on Earth, took over some of our towns, factories, kidnapped some of the innocents, stole and repurposed our combat vehicles, and generally speaking, they work against us and plan something big and nefarious. So, to combat them, you were called in. Now, the situation truly had to be dire, as your chief-in-arms did not even wait for you to finish your soup and send you an instant SOS. And it was a tomato soup no less. Extreme Assault is an action-packed 3D game which gives you a control over an attack copter or a tank and sends you on a series of missions with the general goal of eradicating the outer planet scum and freeing the captives. Now, the story might not be the deepest you've heard, in fact it's rather shallow, but for the most part it's not important. Because it's the fun and action-packed gameplay that's the most crucial here, and Extreme Assault delivers in heaps. It's explosive, it's fast, it's colorful, and so difficult. I mean, sure, there's an easy toggle too, but it offers limited number of levels, so I suggest sticking to the harder and just grinding through the chaos. And believe you me, it will be fun. Presentation-wise, both first and third person views are great, never slowing down and serving most likely highest fidelity images any DOS game ever had, so if you like arcade shooters and don't mind the challenge too much, Extreme Assault is one of the best games of the year. Don't sleep on it. Lands of Lore Guardians of Destiny is a sequel to 1993's Throne of Chaos and a completely changed gameplay-wise title. I mean, it's still an RPG, but it's not using the tired grid-based movement formula anymore. Instead, it banks on real-time fluid movement like Elder Scrolls or Ultima Underworld games. It's a rather fundamental change and one in a good direction, I feel. Anyway, your arch-nemesis from the first game, the witch Scotia, while plotting a revenge, accidentally kickstarted Belial, god of evil's resurrection. With her last dying breath, she passed her shape-shifting powers onto Luther, but since she hadn't had full control of said powers while dying though, she passed them in a damaged form. And Luther can't control when or what he transforms into. And guess what? You're gonna be playing as him this time, which as you can pretty much guess is a bit troublesome. I mean, let's imagine you're in an inn, having drinks with your fellow adventurers and one red-haired dwarf. I mean, you gotta be inclusive, even if he stinks a little. Anyway, suddenly a group of bandits raid the inn and demand payment from all patrons. Naturally, you being the hero that you are, you oppose them, vouching to save the innocents and kick the bandits' asses. Big time. And sometime, during a bloody and difficult combat, just when you were laying justice left and right, kicking said promised asses, you transformed into a tube of toothpaste. I mean, what kind of danger would such a tube pose? None, unless someone would pick it up and start squirting toothpaste at the enemy's eyes. But then, if you transform back, what would that missing toothpaste be? Your innards? Poop? There's no way of knowing. Anyway, my weird theories and terrible curse aside, cause that's definitely not a gift, being the son of hated villain, you're not the most popular person in the lands either. So, you set off on an adventure to find a way to cure yourself and also stop recently awoken Belial. On a more serious note, the only creatures you really transform into while playing are a humanoid beast and a lizard. The first being stronger and able to smash various obstacles into pieces, and second more agile and able to cast magic spells. There are no standard per quest or kill experience point rewards in Guardians of Destiny, instead skills and combat styles that you use in encounters will increase upon use. It's an interesting choice and one I don't mind at all. Lens of Lore's presentation is rather nice. I mean, it's nowhere near what the best FPS games of the time looked like, but for an RPG, it's okay and feature plenty digitized characters and assets. Overall, if you enjoy RPGs, there's a lot to like here and you should definitely give it a go. At the time of its release, MDK was considered a groundbreaking, ultra cool and classic in the making game. Those assumptions were not that far off, as the game was indeed hella fun to play and is, to this day, remembered by many as one of the biggest hits of its time. Was it really groundbreaking and an all-time classic though? Well, that's another thing entirely and something all of you will have to decide for yourself, preferably after trying it out. Personally, I wouldn't go as far, though I agree that it's great. Anyway, it's a third-person action-adventure shooter with some platforming elements in which you play as Kurt Hectic, a cool name I must add. Especially for the futuristic janitor, and you're somehow also the chosen one and the only one that can save the Earth from invading alien forces. I mean, I'm sure you've grown tired of it by now, but you really are the only one to save us again. So, space janitor or not, we count on you. Over the course of 6 missions, you have to destroy the alien machinery that's used to damage our planet, kill the alien commanders, hundreds upon hundreds of various enemies, and finally, their evil boss, Gunter Glad. The level design in MDK is incredibly linear, though it never really feels like it, as the stages are all unique and full of little touches, making them feel special, big and new. Each level is split into smaller stages, making you feel as if you're constantly beating new challenges and progressing further. Now, a game like that, naturally, needs to include various power-ups and pickups. And it does. Quite a few of these, actually. And the most interesting of them all is the world's smallest nuclear bomb. Yep, you heard that right. Guess what it's used for? To open doors, out of all things. Hilarious, right? And for a good reason, because despite the heavy underlying plot and action-packed gameplay, MDK is actually a very light-hearted and full of humorous encounters. Other than that bomb you can pick up, you're wearing this futuristic battlesuit that allows you to glide, has a built-in chain gun, and can even snipe enemies from a distance. And since it's virtually a part of you, you'll be using it a lot, both against enemies and in some of the environmental puzzling challenges. If I was to make a tactical mistake and decide on summarizing MDK in one sentence, I'd say that it's beautiful, crazy, 3D run and gunner in which you have to get from point A to point B, killing everything in your way. Cause that's precisely what it is. So if you've never played it, seek it out and give it a chance, you'll love it. Redneck Rampage is a 2.5D shooter made with Duke Nukem's 3D build engine, and taking place in a backwater small town of Hickston, Arkansas. The levels range from trailer parks to chicken processing plants and everything in between. And weapons you get to use are also setting appropriate, and can be a gun shooting saw blades, TNT crossbow or a machine gun bra, to name a few. All very redneck feeling and hella cool to use against the enemies. Power-ups are also in theme, with whiskey and pork rinds instead of your typical in FPS shooters armor and health kits. I have to admit that other than Duke 3D, Redneck Rampage is probably my most favorite shooter made using the engine, as it's really fun and hilariously over the top. Story-wise, aliens invaded Earth and abducted inhabitants of your backwater town, replacing them with clones. Now, this can't stand. What's even worse, they stole your brother's and yours prize pig Bessie. And this is something that overrides your previous gripe with them, and you can't just let it go. So, you playing as Leonard have to do both. Defeat the aliens and evil clones and recover your beloved Porky. Team Hospital is a business simulation game in which you run a series of privately owned hospitals through its built-in campaign. It's a game well known for its dark sense of humor, pop culture references and the weirdest diseases that you've ever heard of. I mean stuff like bloated heads, King's complexes that turn patients into Elvis impersonators, or even alien DNA infections mutating people into half-aliens. All of this and more are nothing out of ordinary in Team Hospital, and cures for them are as weird, if not weirder, and can even be a literal popping of the enlarged head. The game's funny, is what I'm saying here. But the fun factor does not get in the way of a pretty decent business management aspect of it. So you'll be responsible for everything a good hospital GM would be, and many things you'd not think they would take any interest in. So you'll design and build both diagnostic and treatment rooms, equip them with whatever is necessary and also with what's not, like decorations, trash cans and such. You'll hire staff, so doctors, nurses, receptionists and handymen, and you'll basically do anything and everything to attract as many patients as possible to keep the hospital profitable and patients healthy and cured. You also set up hospital policies, deciding what, when, how and why anything would and would not be allowed in the hospital, and how patients should be treated, diagnosed and when released. It's hella fun. But what is not fun, at least to me, is the game's overarching design. Keep in mind, however, that it's a me issue and not a testament to Team Hospital quality overall. It was made to be a level-based kind of a management, meaning that to unlock further kinds of diseases, rooms and game features, you will have to complete challenges in different hospitals in campaign-like format. I get that it's set up this way to have players gradually learn everything and master the game over time, but I prefer those kinds of experiences to play out in a free sandbox mode, where everything is available and just requires unlocking as you play in one chosen location. That's me though, so ignore it. Overall, Team Hospital is fantastic, and that's what you should take out from this video. Comanche 3 is a third of Novalogic's RAH-66 Comanche attack copter simulator in which you fly in revered Griffin Squadron. The game, same as previous titles in the series, features a very sophisticated and true-to-life physics engine. It is said that US test pilots ensured the quality and realism of the simulation. I have no way of confirming it now, so you either have to take my word for it or ignore the statement entirely. Comanche 3 offers over 30 unique and based on real-life operations missions, full-featured tutorial and easy and advanced flight models for those less and more proficient pilots respectively. That said, even the easy flight model takes a moment to learn and familiarize yourself with, so don't expect it to be an action shooter experience if you choose it. Naturally, all the environments are rendered by Novalogic's own voxel Space 2 technology that provides a very natural-looking jungles, forests, mountain ranges and sand dunes. If you like combat flight simulators, you'll love Comanche 3 too. If you don't, then I don't know. Try it to see if you like it. I suck at those very realistic simulations, so I can't tell you much more about it, as whenever I try to play this, I fail miserably and grow annoyed with it. War never changes. Nope, sorry, wrong script. Let me start again. Where do I have it? Oh, here it is. Okay, let's see. War never changes. God damn it. Hey Google, where's my XCOM Apocalypse script?
Sorry, I didn't understand.
Figures. So, XCOM Apocalypse is a third game in the original XCOM series and a direct follow-up to Terror from the Deep. It's also a game that turned the entire franchise upside down, and my second most favorite DOS game of 1997, trailing behind Fallout only. After the last war, things have not gone well for humans, and most that survived live in a huge self-sufficient city of Mega Primus. The civilization took a while to rebuild, and as soon as everything appeared to be finally changing for the better, strange portals started showing up in the sky over the megapolis, And surprise surprise, it's the aliens again, and this time they're even more of a threat than ever before. So, XCOM is needed once again to save the day and humanity at the same time. The main core of the series is sustained in the apocalypse, meaning that research, development, base micro and macro management, tactical squad-based combat during missions, and ship-to-ship air combat respectively are all preserved. A bit changed, sure, but still present in the game and easy to grasp for whomever played the earlier titles. As usual, you will also have to carefully manage your budget, as you're nearly never going to be in a situation where you'll have too much cash lying around gathering dust, and soldiers, vehicles and scientists all have to be recruited and equipped. To the teeth, no less. Now, let's get into what's different, and there's a lot of it. For starters, beautiful detailed SVGA graphics replaced older, low-res tile-based 2D engine, and this new presentation allowed for much more to be seen at once, making those longer missions easier to manage without having to constantly scroll through the huge combat maps. And since we're on the subject, combat can be either turn-based or real-time. It's clear that the game was designed with this new real-time approach in mind, but even turn-based lovers such as myself will quickly learn to adapt and either use it or stick to tried and tested turns. I did. Played it in turns, that is, and it didn't feel as if I was missing anything or being handicapped because of that. There are many more interesting maps in Apocalypse to fight with the aliens now too, so you'll be tackling outwardly threats in slums, corporate buildings and their headquarters, glass-encased farms, factories, apartment buildings and in wreckages of downed UFOs to name a few. Most weapons, upgrades and vehicles are entirely new as well and a pleasure to manufacture and then use against the invaders. Many of the aliens are also different, new versions of old Xenos, and some of them are really imaginative and clearly inspired by the Alien franchise of movies. Which, you know, fits the game's theme quite well. The city of Megaprimus, while theoretically being just a location the game is set in, feels alive. It's run by numerous megacorporations that are constantly at odds with each other, and it's them that you have to protect to secure the funding for progress. Nearly always interests of these groups will clash and will directly oppose one another, so you'll need to make a lot of difficult choices along the campaign because it's just impossible to please everyone. The sooner you realize it, the better. And if you anger one of the corpus enough, it may not only become your enemy and engage you in combat, but even join the alien side. Caution and careful planning in XCOM should really be applied to any and all big or small decisions and day-to-day occurrences in the city. If you hire scientists or purchase something, anything, all of these have to be delivered to your base and don't just magically appear in it. So transports, as they are on their way, are susceptible to ambushes and attacks and have to be protected. At least if you know that you're at odds with someone or aliens are around. As much as Apocalypse never received as wide popularity and success as the two earlier games did, it was an amazing, even if underrated title, and all fans of the original, if they only give it a chance, will most definitely love it. It's a true sequel and not an add-on or a reskin that Terror from the Deep to a certain degree was, and a good time for weeks on end. I promise. Well no, scratch that. Good time if you're good enough to answer the call, that is. Because failing in XCOM is always an option too. X-Men Children of the Atom is one of the last great versus fighting games that released for DOS. And it's really that good, that the word great was not misused in the first sentence. You have my word. It's a near one-to-one port from the arcades, but from what I can tell, nothing was lost in the conversion. Sprites are as big and colorful as they were, backgrounds are appropriately lush and identical to those in the arcades, and all character moves seem to be present in the DOS version too. Children of the Atom runs as smoothly, if not smoother, than it did originally. It was developed by Capcom and published by Acclaim, and it's a first Capcom's game to include licensed X-Men IP characters, both heroes and villains. And they are, in no particular order, Colossus, Cyclops, Iceman, Psylocke, Storm, Wolverine, Omega Red, Silver Samurai, Spiral, and even Sentinel. You know, the biggest robot manufactured to capture mutants and failing to do so whenever X-Men are around. The bosses are Juggernaut and Magneto, and Street Fighter's Akuma is a hidden unlockable character. That does not fit the lore, but it's a nice touch. All of these have very unique moves, both basic and special, and are as faithful and respectful to the source material of Marvel's characters as it was possible in 1997. X-Men Children of the Atom is really fun, and figuring out all the best strategies with each character is really addictive. Especially for the fans of Marvel as big as myself. Love-wise, not the size, because I'm actually rather short. If I was a bit more hairy and aggressive, I could be Wolverine. Well, I'd still lack the healing factor and adamantium skeleton, but one step at a time, right? Multiplayer is where the game obviously shines, and I have to say that if you give it time and master all the characters, you'll have a time of your life, as X-Men really feels balanced, and is a dream come true for a versus fighter. It is easily my favorite DOS versus fighting game of the second half of the 90s. When our protagonist Abe overhears that his race of Madcons that's been enslaved by the evil Glacons to work in their huge corporations is actually a delicacy, a source of incredibly delicious and popular meat for the Glacons, he decides to run away and save as many of his brethren as possible, whatever the means necessary. Oddworld Abe's Odyssey is an action puzzle platformer that was very popular, especially on Sony PlayStation, mainly for having beautiful presentation, offering interesting gameplay mechanic and a very well thought out mixture of puzzling and quick-time arcade elements. It's also a game I never liked. Regardless of how many times I tried making myself get into it, I always failed. It's just not for me, and I can't tell why. Perhaps because it's so unforgiving, it feels like a Souls-like, which is another genre I despise for being more frustrating than rewarding. Or perhaps something else. I will never know, as I will never try it out again. But generally speaking, I'm in a very tiny vocal minority. Most critics and gamers of the time loved it, found it enchanting and challenging just enough to keep them entertained, but not enough to cause anger and annoyance. So, if you're not an avid hater of Souls games as I am, and enjoy platformers, perhaps Oddworld is something you might find yourself liking, which I wish upon you as it really gets no love from me. Shadow Warrior is a first-person shooter and one of the last games to use the famous Duke 3D's build engine, its latest and most feature-packed iteration in fact. So, it's the first game using the engine to feature true room-over-room locations, transparent water, climbable ladders, vehicles that can actually be driven and 3D voxel-based weapons and items, as opposed to 2D sprites. So, if Duke was 2.5D, Shadow Warrior was 2.75D. Lo Wang, that you play as, is a titular Shadow Warrior, a deadly semi-mercenary bodyguard working for the Japanese Zilla Corporation. It was a steady and comfortable job that he was really happy with, he got to cut down bodies, he nearly always had Sundays off, and all-you-can-eat sushi bars all over Japan were part of his contract, along with extensive dental and mani-pedis. It was great. Well, at least till he discovered that Zilla secretly planned to summon monsters from the other dimensions to conquer the world. Naturally, his leaving his post was not something that could happen, so the assassins were sent after our small Wang. I know, he was low and not small, but it somehow fits better here. Shadow Warrior is composed out of series of large levels which mainly require you to dispose of all the enemies and find the exit to progress. It features quite a few puzzles all throughout, which was not a given in most shooters of the time, usually relegating this to seeking keys. The enemies are rather varied and can be anything from different kinds of generic Asian warriors through ninjas, explosive crate carrying kamikazes, all the way to weird monster-like creatures, and anything in between. To combat this, you have a pretty wide and unusual arsenal too, which consists of, but is not limited to, katanas, twin Uzis, nuclear missile using rocket launchers, sticky bombs and even enemy body parts. Because why not, right? They are there and they're begging to be used to pummel a body to the pulp. While Shadow Warrior's setting is rather dark and touches on the demonic a little, the game is actually chock full of politically incorrect humor, tons upon tons of one-liners, and is generally speaking as, if not more, fun than Duke 3D was. If you like the original, you'll enjoy this one is what I'm saying. The Last Express is a real-time point-and-click adventure set in 1914, just before the outbreak of the World War. You play as American Dr. Robert Cuff, who accepted an invite from a friend to join him on the Orient Express. You being you, however, get on the train with style. And I mean it. You literally jump on it from a speeding motorcycle, escaping the authorities as a misplaced suspect in murder you did not commit. Naturally, from the moment you accept to the moment you jump on the train, a little time has passed and your agreement may have been partly based in the authorities looking for you, but I'm simplifying it for the sake of the video. If that all wasn't enough, and your life wasn't full of odd happenings already, when you finally get on the train, you find the body of a friend of yours, also killed. So, to escape the suspicion of two murders, you decide to disguise yourself as the dead man. And all that is just the beginning of the roller coaster of treachery, lies, political conspiracies, personal interests, romance and murder, all aboard the train. Even though The Last Express was not commercial success upon its release, it gained highly positive reviews from both gamers and professionals alike, not in small part thanks to its non-linear story and real-time gameplay. While most of the game is experienced from the first-person perspective, all of the cutscenes are in third-person view. The time keeps running constantly and in real time, albeit by factor of 6, and many of the events in the game are scripted and run on a schedule too, so you have to keep track of the in-game timer and their on-train locations to be able to witness them as they take place. The game features over 30 individual unique characters, all with their own artificial intelligence and agendas, so when talking to them you always have to keep in mind that they're after their personal goals first and anything else later. The Last Express offers staggering 30 quote-unquote bad endings, 4 alternate neutral ones and one that's considered the true ending. The game may have not been commercial success, but it's definitely worth your attention and also a full playthrough. Especially that 1997 was the last year fully commercial, professional adventure games were released for DOS, as it was slowly phasing off from Minds of Death as the viable gaming platform. Pro Pinball Timeshock is one of the best early real 3D pinballs. As the title suggests, the main theme is the time travel, and as you play the game and unlock different periods, you'll be able to access the present day, distant future, ancient Rome and prehistoric age times. While gameplay mechanics persist between the time, unlocks and bonuses differ, keeping Timeshock fresh and fun. The game features 4 different camera views for the most immersive experience possible and plenty of videos in the dot matrix display to keep you entertained. I could go on about different bonuses, point earning combos and overall idea behind scoring big, but that's pointless really, right? Pinball is pinball, and this one happens to be fantastic. Sure, it doesn't offer many tables or unrealistic features we're used to today, but it's hella playable, and it's one of the best games in the genre in the second half of the 90s on DOS. Interesting fact, in 2014, Dutch company Silver Castle Pinball purchased rights to it, aiming to create a real-life version of Timeshock. And while few prototypes were released since then, the company seemed to have went bankrupt shortly after, and currently their Twitter, website and Facebook seem to be inactive. And we never got to see Timeshock converted to real arcade table. I've mentioned it numerous times on this channel, and it's no news for those who've been watching my videos for a while, but Heroes of Might and Magic 2 is my most favorite outing in the whole series. And I've intentionally did not cover it in a video for 1996, as I wanted to do it here, along with its add-on, as a complete package. If you don't know what Heroes 2 is, which is unlikely, let me quickly explain before I get into detail about its expansion from 1997. It's a turn-based fantasy tactical strategy spin-off from the mainline Might and Magic series, and a title that quickly outgrew the game it was based on and became one of the most popular series ever made. It's divided into 3 parts: castle management, in which each of the different heroes hires units, erects buildings that allow them to expand their army, buy spells or offer unique bonuses. The Overworld map allows you to secure different resource-producing facilities, neutral bonus buildings, travel around the world of Enroth, and engage random monsters or other players in combat. Combat itself takes place on separate tactical screens, in which both sides move their units in alternating order, battling it out till there's only one side standing. That's the gist of it. The Price of Loyalty is the first and only expansion to Heroes 2, but just because there was no others, it doesn't mean that it's not a good one. In fact, it nearly doubles the amount of content of the base game. It features 4 new campaigns, 2 short, 3-4 map strong ones, and 2 longer, built out of 8 maps each. And while it may seem that these may be of similar length to those found in the base game, they're played on bigger maps and are more demanding, so should take noticeably longer to complete. They also feature optional completion paths, adding to the replayability a lot. But let's not kid ourselves, while campaigns are fun and all, most of us played Heroes either against friends or on random maps, having completed campaigns in a heartbeat on the week of game's release. The novelties don't end with campaigns, naturally. Heroes 2 also introduced new locations, new artifacts and monsters too. All this made the game much more fun and exponentially extended its longevity. Especially worth mentioning, out of the on-map locations were the barriers that required you to find the password for first, and when opened they did both, open new areas for you to explore and conquer, and doors for the enemies to radio lands. While there were a few creature dwellings added, the most interesting and useful was the Barrow Mount, which allowed recruiting of ghosts, one of the best units in the entire game. They were far from being the strongest, fastest or most resistant. In fact, they sat somewhere in the middle stat-wise, but had an uncanny ability to add to their unit number by defeating enemies. So they are best utilized against large groups of easy enemies. They would quote-unquote feed on them, multiplying their numbers, promptly increasing their importance on the battlefield with each attack. Elementals could be recruited too, but were considerably less impactful. Hat of the Magi is also worth mentioning among new additions as it expands your map view. New artifacts in large part contain both considerable bonuses and penalties, making for a very strategic choice, having to decide if a particular change you were after was worth the coming with it punishment. And finally, an item set that created a new super powerful artifact when all three base ones were picked up. Some towns got extra buildings or other small modifications to how base ones worked. They were less immediately noticeable but fun nonetheless changes. And finally, the expansion came with incredibly easy to use and yet robust and updated map editor that allowed for use of all assets available in the game and scripting. And all that resulted with my most favorite ever custom Heroes 2 map being created, Gyros 2. If you played it, you know why. If you didn't, let me know. I'm sure I can help you get your pose on it. I love Heroes of Might and Magic 2, and Price of Loyalty made it even better, bigger and more playable. A masterpiece in my eyes. Sure, objectively speaking Heroes 3 was better, but to me, nothing could compare to the second. The original KKND is the first in the trilogy of post-apocalyptic real-time strategy games, and I've only ever played it a little. I was never big on RTSs and this one was no different. In 2140, after the world has collapsed, two remaining factions keep fighting for control of the Earth and its last remaining resources worth anything. Especially, most important of them all, oil. They are the survivors, so humans who waited out the destruction underground in relative safety, and the evolved, mutants who survived the catastrophe on the surface and suffered through the worst that had ever happened to the planet. Oil is used as the primary resource to earn the currency required to construct buildings and train units. Interestingly enough, most of these buildings can be upgraded multiple times to unlock new options within them. Both factions have entirely different sets of units, with survivors utilizing high-tech vehicles of various kinds and evolved mainly using mutated animals that they've learned to control. Both of these have their own 15-mission-long campaigns. Gamers and critics seem to love KKND when it released, so it not only sold quite well, but also spawned two follow-up titles in the coming years. If you were into the genre, you most likely knew and liked it, but if you somehow missed it, today is as good time as any to fix it. First time that I ever played Grand Theft Auto, it wasn't even a full game, but a time-limited demo. I can't tell you how long it was, as I don't remember, but I feel that it was something like 30 minutes or so at most. Not long though, but I must have played it at least 100 times. I've put so much time in it, it's ridiculous. I mean, most full games that came out back then never got as much attention from me as this demo did. And that was the GTA phenomenon. I got the full version a little while later, first as a copy of questionable legality without any FMV movies and generally speaking lacking a lot of the atmosphere. And a month or so later a full Gen 1 boxed release. That was a game to sink hundreds of hours in easily. I mean, sure, story could probably be completed in around 15 hours, but former GTA games, same as the current ones, were not only about the story that the developers prepared, but also about experiences you could craft for yourself while playing, just messing around with the game world. And yeah, that's what I mainly did, and you most likely do. Anyway, I don't think that's possible, but on an odd chance that some of you might have been living under the rock the last few decades, or locked off in some remote bunker by a maniacal cult leader, let me tell you what it actually is. Grand Theft Auto is a top-down, always scrolling arcade game in which you take a role of a small-time criminal trying to make it big in the gang world and rise through the mobster ranks. It takes place in a tri-city area of Liberty City, based on New York, San Andreas, based on San Francisco, and Vice City, based on Miami. And they're divided into 6 parts that all need to be unlocked while playing. Each unlock requires a certain score to be reached, but doing so also gives you time to familiarize yourself with the part of the city that you currently have access to, which may seem like a weird choice, but having to know the city by heart not only helps with avoiding police chases, but also teaches you of locations of all the important utilities, shortcuts, weapon pickup spots and such, which in the heat of the moment later on may and will save your life. Main missions are picked up by answering phones, while secondary side activities are usually hidden in cars parked in unusual locations. Main missions are your typical seen in hundreds of movies to date gang/mob tasks of anything from ditching a hot cart for trashing, through robberies, bank jobs, all the way to assassinations. Basically, whatever you've seen in a movie is most likely one way or another somehow depicted in the game. Completing missions not only raises your score, but also your score multiplier, so having successfully done few in a row can be worth astronomical points. Side missions are usually timed events of various kinds, often centered around killing certain number or type of citizens in a limited time. All those criminal activities, however, raise the police suspicion of you, and eventually you'll get your first star. First wanted level, which represents how much of an interest you are to the boys in blue. 1 star usually means a single, maybe 2 squad cars going after you, but if the meter's all the way to the full, a whole police force will be actively chasing you. They will shoot to kill, they'll set up roadblocks, and will hunt you till their dying breaths. Literally, as knowing you'll be disposing of them in a wholesale manner, leaving a trail of death and future orphans behind. The only way to get rid of the wanted level, other than the occasional bonus pickup, is to find and visit Respray Shop, where you'll get new license plates and forever disappear from the cops' radar. By forever, I mean until your next crime, so more or less 40-45 seconds. And this is where the familiarity with the city I spoke about earlier on comes in handy, in knowing where to race off to disappear. Interestingly enough, unlike modern GTA games, in First you did not have an unlimited number of lives, and dying too many times could actually end your game. A single death usually results in losing all of your weapons and armor, and score multiplier lowering on top of that too. There are crates scattered around the city, and they can contain weapons, from basic pistols all the way to the rocket launchers, armor, extra lives, police bribes that remove your current wanted level, and get out of the jail free cards that prevent you from losing items upon death or being busted. Sounds hella cool, right? It was. It is to this day actually. And while the missions are fun and all, it's the scenarios that you would organically create for yourself just messing around in the city in dozens of available and differently handling cars that made GTA such a special little bag of fun. Twinsen's Odyssey, aka Little Big Adventure 2, is a direct follow-up to the first game, and also an action-adventure with some very superficial role-playing elements. Twinsen, hero of the first game, has gotten married, settled down, and is ready to have a child and carry on with his peaceful idle life. One day, however, his friend Dinofly is mysteriously struck by lightning and hurt. I would like to pause here for a second to appreciate the creativity behind the name Dinofly. What an achievement in writing. I too wanted to name my cat Dog at some point, but managed to stop myself before committing the crime on creativity. Sadly, no one heard the deaths here, so we've ended up with Dinofly. Anyway, after a short investigation, Twinsen discovers that the lightning was caused by visitors from outer space. So he has no choice but to once again embark on a quest to save his world. Same as in previous game, the viewpoint is top-down isometric, and your main focus is centered around traversal around the world and interaction with objects and characters. Once again, all 4 stances are available and should be used in appropriate places to progress the plot. So, normal, aggressive, sneaky and athletic. The game world is much larger this time, offering side quests and many optional objectives. The only difference from the first game apart from the story and scope of the world are the graphics, which are now displayed in real 3D and not pre-rendered. Twinsen's Odyssey is an amazing game, same as the original was, and a very underappreciated title that deserved much more recognition than it ever received. If you like action-adventure games, you'll have a lot of fun with this one. Dungeon Keeper is an oddity. It's part real-time strategy, part settlement management, part tower defense, short of the towers, and finally part first-person fantasy combat game. And when all these powers combine, I am Captain Planet! Oh, my bad, wrong video. Obviously I meant that with all this combined, what we're left with is amazingly addictive and very fun game that's a pleasure to play today as much as it originally was. You have to construct and manage a dungeon and then recruit and train minions to defend it. You mine for gold and gems, set traps, build rooms, each with its unique purpose and use case scenario, and cast spells. I know that these 2 sentences were a lot to process, but Dungeon Keeper is all that and more. Your main task is to defend your dungeon heart, cause when that falls, you lose. And you protect it from heroes that keep invading your dungeon, fighting your creatures, hunting for treasures, and ultimately trying to get to that still beating dungeon heart. The heroes are not only boring knights either, and can be among others giants, wizards or even samurais. Because game logic. And also, why the hell not? Who said that samurais and wizards can't be best friends? As you progress through the game and unlock new rooms and creatures, you'll keep finding new ways to experience, enjoy and progress within the world of Dungeon Keeper, and its 20 regions waiting to be conquered. Each of the creatures you build the room for is different in both stats and their behavior, and some of them are actually natural enemies to one another. So you should not build rooms willy-nilly just wherever it suits you, but plan ahead. Spiders and flies, for instance, are quite obvious enemies, so keeping them close will never yield good results, at least not for the flies. Dungeon Keeper is amazing. It may not look like anything special in this short video preview, but believe me, it's so good that not many games of 1997 could compare to it in terms of playability. Especially that up to 4 Dungeon Masters could play together via modem or LAN. It's a gem. I loved Ignition when it came out. I played it to death alone, and quite a lot with a buddy of mine in split screen too. But let's not get ahead of ourselves and figure out what it's all about. Ignition is an action-packed top-down racer, and it's an unusual one at that. It feels like a mixture of regular 3D racing with older but oh so sweet micro machines, and it rocks. The combination shouldn't work, because why would it? And yet it does, and so well. Everything about it is great. The tracks are all excellent, unique, fun to race on, learn and conquer, full of obstacles, jumps and different hazards. They are multi-level serpent-filled masterpieces, so it's not unusual to be seeing your opponent way below you on an earlier stretch of the road if you're few seconds ahead of him. The beauty of their design lies in those little details that are often overlooked when frantically racing, but also happen to be the building blocks of this entire incredible game. Then there's something many may not give any attention to, so camera, and it's perfect. It follows the action relentlessly, never gets in the way, never puts you in a position of not being able to see any important part of the road that you need to, or the next corner. It's well baked in and works flawlessly is what I'm saying. Finally, there's 11 vehicles in the game, and I say vehicles and not racing cars intentionally, as they're a really mixed bunch. From Beetles and Jeeps, through police squad cars, all the way to the school buses. And each handles and behaves differently at speed during jumps or drifting. Some are better for short, full of turns tracks, others are well suited for long straights, and then there are those that are somewhere in between. But all have their own use cases and tracks that they work great on. So there's no single best car out of them all. Aggressive and very dynamic gameplay, coupled with fantastically designed tracks and unique cars, make Ignition a true gem of a game. If you've never played it, you're in for a hell of a time. And if you have, you're just sitting there, smiling, all default, nodding in agreement how much fun Ignition can be. Also, only 4 tracks and cars are available at start, and the rest needs to be unlocked by winning races. So there's some sense of progression if you play alone too. While 1997 was the last, or at best penultimate year when anything good came out for DOS, it was stacked with awesome games to the brim and a lot of fun to experience. But what do you think of it though? Let me know in the comments below. If you liked the video, hit those like and subscribe buttons below. Smash them if you have to, it helps more than you could ever know. Also, I would like to thank you and all my amazing Patreon and YouTube members for helping this channel keep going. And last but definitely not least, I would like to thank all the wonderful folks who record and upload playthroughs, let's plays and other retro-centric videos here on YouTube, because they help to preserve the games that would have otherwise been long forgotten. So thank you.